So it started very much as a piece of paper and a pen riding around in every piece of equipment, right? Recording what operations were being done, and the next person that would hop into the tractor would be able to see, okay, this was the date and this was what happened and this was what the weather was like. And if you ever lost that piece of paper, God forbid, you were in trouble, or at least you didn't have the best management practices like we do now. And now it's kind of almost automatic. A lot of our equipment on our farm, we do have it set up. So as soon as you turn the key on and pick your field, it will kind of start mapping and tell you what you've done and keep track of all those goodies so you can look back later on. So I use a lot of my data management to keep track of and record different trials within our own farm. So we can use different methods on different parts of the field to see which has created the most desirable result. If there's no yield increase, typically it means that there wasn't a good enough use for it until the next year, but occasionally there are other desirable outcomes, such as if the crop is standing better, if it was easier to harvest, or if it was more tolerant to drought or other things like that could kind of make it benefit in different ways. But typically it's the yield that we're looking to boost.
Hi, and welcome to this special edition of Between the Rows. I'm here today with Krista Kilback, Marketing Manager for Ag Expert at Farm Credit Canada, and Justin Funk, Partner of Real Agri Studies, to talk about data management on the farm. We've just heard some clips from Saskatchewan farmer Ian McClellan about how data collection on his farm has changed over the past decade, and importantly, how much that transformation has improved his family's ability to use that data to inform their decision-making. Justin, how common is Ian's experience relative to other farmers? This has been a fairly fast uptake of this kind of technology.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Laura. You know what? I think that his experience is pretty common. I think one thing we have observed over the past number of years, there hasn't been a shortage of technology available, but we're starting to see that technology be adopted at a more rapid pace because people are understanding the value of it. And they're understanding how to use it, and they're starting to be able to see a return on it. And, I think combined with that, a lot of the original or typical barriers to entry are being removed as well. And so I think that you're going to hear a lot more stories about Ian's in the coming years for sure.
Krista, based on your experience with Ag Expert, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I've talked to lots of customers with Ag Expert, and for sure, I would say that's really typical. And I think the customers or the producers that I spoke to, they were collecting data in one form or another, whether it be pen and paper, whether it just, they think they're going to remember it all. But there comes a point, though, where just in terms of the value that they need or a specific problem on the farm that they need to solve, there is a better way, right? And so I think we're seeing that with Ian, and I've heard other customers that maybe with technology, there's so much, they might just use a certain part or piece of it. I know of a customer, he farms with his dad, and he said the best thing for us is really just even keeping track of the grain that's in the bin. And he's like, that's been the best efficiency for us on the farm. And just, not having to try to figure that out when he goes out, because he just farms part-time with his dad, and try to figure it out. He's like, for us, that has been the biggest time efficiency for us on the farm. And so a win for them for sure.
Why is data management becoming so much more important in farming operations today?
There's just, I think for, producers, I think it's important just in terms of all the uncertainty, I think, today, and whether it be increasing prices or any type of risk, I guess, it really, I think, it allows them to collect the data, but I think taking it to the next step and being able to use the data to make decisions, right? Hopefully that is really going to help, again, manage some of that uncertainty and then make decisions, I would say, specific to their farms that can help them long term. So even again, if I think about a customer that I spoke to, he pretty much said, like, so he farms with his dad, and he said, a lot of the times, like, they used pen and paper to manage the bookkeeping. And he said, by the time I needed to find out a decision and go over there, find my dad, look through all the bookwork and all that, he's like, the moment had passed, right? And it just turned into a big thing. So for him, the efficiency was they moved to a web-based accounting program. And he said, it's been amazing. He can have information in the moment at any time's notice. And, he knows if he can go to the auction or not, right? So it's been great in that sense. So
Justin, you're just working through the results of a recent survey you've done with farmers about how they're using data and how their transition is taking place. What was the purpose of doing that survey?
Well, there were a couple reasons for doing the study. One was to get a better handle on how farmers were adopting and utilizing digital tools and managing data today, but also to take a look backwards to see how that's evolved over the last 4 years. So this study was originally done with the group at Ag Expert in 2018 to essentially benchmark what data management looked like on Canadian farms. I had an opportunity then to collaborate with Ag Expert and through our Real Agri-Studies panel, conduct a survey to bring us up to speed as to where things were today. And so 750-ish farmers answered this survey and provided us their insights. And it wasn't just about the use of the data either, it was how they feel about the data, particularly the level of trust associated with those that they are sharing that data with, which of course is a very important part of using the data, is being able to share that data with trusted advisors and others to help make some of these important decisions.
What were some of the highlights that you found in this?
Well, first of all, I wasn't quite sure what we were going to get back, but we had tremendous uptake to the survey. This is an issue that's top of mind. So it's not necessarily a conclusion from a bar chart or anything, but to have 750 farmers voluntarily complete a survey within like a 36-hour time frame is outstanding. One of the things that we asked right out at the beginning was, to what extent are you using data? It was a rather generic question, but we found that 62% of farmers told us that they were either moderate or extensive users of data on their farm, which when you think about that, that's well over half. That's a sizable amount. And it's not a question we asked in 2018, but just to get a sense as to where we stand today, a lot of farmers, one way or another, are using data to manage decision-making and other activities on the farm.
Were there any big surprises in the information that you got back?
There's always surprises because you go into something like this thinking it's going to be one way and then it turns out to be another. And sometimes the things you learn validate exactly what you thought you were going to see. I'm not sure about surprises, but it's clear to me after looking at this information, farmers are not just using data now, but are going to make it a priority for the future. We asked some attitude statements that were geared towards that. And, that's a very encouraging sign when you see people who are not only using it now, but are telling us that they want to use more. A couple other things that we learned is that it's not always the younger farmers either that are using the data. Sometimes we draw these conclusions that younger farmers are more inclined to adopt new technology. And in some cases, that's true. But in other cases, it's not. And here we find that more mature farmers seem to be just as inclined to want to be using data, maybe for different reasons, but just as inclined as the younger farmer. And so age is not a barrier to entry as far as I'm concerned. There might be some reasons why they are somewhat hesitant because it essentially changes the way that they have done things, and the longer period of time you have to implement some of these ideas, maybe the more inclined you are to adopt. But when you go into something like this, you look for those sorts of demographic relationships. And in this case, there wasn't anything that was outstanding. to that degree. One thing that was, though, is there seems to be a direct relationship between size of farm and use of data. Where, for whatever reason, larger farmers seem to be a little more ahead on the adoption curve. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. I think that they might be more motivated to do it, but they also might have a better time dealing with some of those barriers to entry. For instance, having the right equipment or having the right people in place. Or it could be attention they're getting from suppliers to encourage them to adopt that technology and to nurture them through that process. So I wouldn't call that a surprise necessarily, but it was definitely a clear observation from the data that we collected.
When you think about the sheer scale and the complexity of the decisions in a larger operation, plus the dollar figures attached to it, there's a lot more risk associated with making the wrong decision. Is that part of the scenario that you see evolving for these guys?
I think so. I think that there's often that saying, I can farm big or I can farm smart. And I think in some cases you do both. And the bigger these farms are, the more complex the decisions are, and to have the right tools, whether that be the right equipment or the right crop input or animal nutrition products, whatever you can do to take the risk out. Data is one of those ways that farmers can manage risk. It can help them be more organized. Of course, larger farms have a lot more to organize, I believe. You can be more precise, you can be more predictive, you can be more collaborative, and ultimately make better decisions that are going to impact profitability. And these are all motivators, I think, that go along with managing a good-sized business.
Krista, do you think that farmers are today capturing the full value of this crop of data that they actually harvest every year? I mean, we think of them harvesting grains, but with the sensors on their equipment now, they're collecting data every time they turn around. Are they capturing the full value?
I'm not sure if we're there yet in terms of, capturing everything that technology today has to offer. There's a lot, right? It comes from a whole bunch of different places. And I think there's still some work to be done in terms of making it as easy as possible for farmers to be able to really, analyze the data and all the different sources that it comes from. But I definitely think that, we're in a better place today. I think, like Justin said, farmers are definitely more apt for the technology and to make it work for them and the types of returns that they want to see in terms of productivity.
Justin, what are the gaps or issues that would prevent farmers from taking full advantage of the data that they're collecting?
Well, there's some gaps or barriers that are real, and there's some that I believe are perceptual. The real barriers, of course, having the right equipment, having time in order to implement it, I think is another one. A lot of these tools have a pretty steep learning curve. And then I think that going along with that is the support that comes from those that are helping farmers implement the use of data. I do a lot of work in the ag retail space, and I have a lot of conversations with sales agronomists or managers at retail outlets who've made it a priority, as part of their points of differentiation to be pretty high on the spectrum of data use, to be positioned as somebody who can really help farmers do this. And, they've often commented to me just how much untapped potential there is out there in using the data and trying to get farmers to implement it and use it is hard. It's one thing to say, yeah, I want to do it, but it's another thing to actually do it. And so what are the perceptual barriers that might stand in the way? One, I think there's maybe this notion that it's too big to handle, right? So I've got a lot of things on the go, and this is a fundamental shift in how I manage production or bookkeeping or whatever the case is. And so I can't do it. Well, I mean, I think that can be overcome through education, through nurturing and support, and really helping people see the value and the ROI. And I think that's the second perceptual barrier. I think that sometimes the results aren't immediately visible. And so having the patience to start something new and to work through it and eventually see the results, I think, the immediacy there, or the lack thereof, presents a bit of a barrier. I think that there's also then the whole trust factor. I think that we as a society have sort of been conditioned to think that our data is not safe. And you see this happening in the media around us, when you hear about data leaks and stuff like that. I'm no expert on the technical side of this, but what I do know is that if people are fearful of sharing data, then they're going to be less inclined to do it. And so one of the things that we tried to measure in the study is how has that perception of trust changed over time. And an encouraging finding, again, not a surprise, but an encouraging finding, is that people seem to feel better about sharing their data with trusted suppliers today than they did 4 years ago. And I think there's a couple factors that go into that. One is they're using it more, and so they can see that it's being treated with respect. They can see the benefit that's coming their way. But also, the more experience they have with it, just in general, the more comfortable they're going to be the next time they have an opportunity to use it. So, yeah, I think there's those real barriers, those perceptual barriers, both can be overcome. I think some might be a little bit harder than others. The perceptual ones in particular. Getting people to change their mind is not easy.
Now, if farmers are to fully leverage this as a resource, of course, they need a reliable package to manage it. So the question then becomes, what should they be looking for in a data management package? And before I get to your thoughts on this, I wanted to share some comments from a conversation I had with Eduardo Trombetta, who's manager of software development for the Ag Expert team at Farm Credit Canada. He talked about the importance of making sure, the company has a reliable track record, it's trustworthy, that it offers good IT support, that it's, got longevity in the marketplace. It's not just arrived yesterday, and whether it offers people the opportunity to try the package out. But he also mentioned something called Ag Data Transparency Certification as being very important. And here's what he had to say about that.
There's one called Ag Data Transparency. And the focus there is around ownership and simplicity and transparency. And they have a really good website where you can go to, and they talk about their core principles. But most of it is around just making sure that organizations who achieve that certification are clear with their customers in very easy to read language about what they're signing up for and what's going to, that they own all of their data and they're not going to be doing anything with that data without very explicit consent from the user, and just keeping terminology simple. There's always those very long agreements when you sign up for any website or any digital product. It's pages and pages of legal speak that nobody ever reads or understands. So that Ag Data Transparency is kind of a way of greatly simplifying that for users and giving them language that they can understand, and cuts out a lot of the red tape that you really don't need to fully understand.
Now, Eduardo also said it's important to talk to the vendor about what cybersecurity safeguards they have in place and how they will protect your data. You referred to that as well, Justin. Here's how he put it.
I'd recommend even having a conversation with the vendor. When you're getting that demo, you're phoning about the product to talk about whatever. Ask them about cybersecurity, because they should know answers to things like how do they physically protect your data, or what is their data backup strategy? Do they have any kind of notable certifications like SOC 2 or PCI if they're handling credit cards? Do they have training requirements of their developers and their engineers? And do they have cybersecurity professionals in the company? So a lot of that stuff, you're probably going to have to ask them questions around that, but you may find some of it in their literature on the website.
Eduardo had one final word of advice, and it was related to price versus the value of what you're getting for your investment.
My advice would be, don't just look at the price and compare, what you see on a website to the first thing you see on the other website. Take the time to compare both the price and the features that you get across different products that you're interested in. dig in and find out what you're going to get for your dollar, because some vendors may have a very low upfront price, but then when you dig in and say, well, okay, I need to use payroll, or I want this specific type of report, or this specific type of module for my business, or I want multiple people to be able to have access to it, then you'll sometimes find that the price goes up and they charge more for those kinds of features. And some vendors, you'll just get an all-in-one price where they give you everything that they have for the same price. So dig into that, I guess, as well, and don't just go off of the first dollar sign that you see, to take the time to find out what you're getting for it.
Krista, do farmers sometimes get talked into buying the best deal as opposed to getting the best value for their money?
Potentially, is cheaper necessarily better? Not always, right? Again, just always bringing it back to the customers and the farmers that I've spoke to that use Ag Expert. I think it really depends on, the return that they see, the value that they have specifically for their operation, and, the efficiency that it creates for their operation. Yes. I mean, I don't think you can put a dollar amount on that. I mean, sure, we'd like to have, higher cost of production, but some of these little things, though, that I hear about that make the biggest impacts on farms, honestly, have just been instrumental to making such a huge difference to an operation. And so I think, don't only look at the price tag is what I'm trying to say.
Justin, what are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting when you take a look at how companies try to gain adoption, not just for software, but just for anything. You give it away, or you incentivize people with price. I think in this case, we've seen sort of the spectrum. Initially, there were some field management software programs that were upwards of $10,000 to subscribe to. That didn't last very long. Now we find that companies are giving these software packages away to key customers, and it doesn't really have much bearing on adoption. I think that the value that somebody sees is not what they're paying for the software; it's what they're getting out of it. And I think that we sometimes assume that people understand what value means, but sometimes we have to teach them what to look for. And so, for instance, you look at the cost of adopting software. Is it really the monthly subscription fee, or is it the behavior change that goes along with it? So are we really dealing with the right issue when we're just giving stuff away with no financial cost? And sometimes I think that there's a reason to believe that people will actually value it more if they're invested in it a little bit more financially. So, I'm not sure that the cost is really the key variable here. I think it's the usability. I think it's the observability. I think there's a trialability bit to this, and of course, if it's not understood, if it's complex, not compatible, it doesn't have relative advantage over what they were doing before, then chances are it's nothing's going to work. So, I think that we need to be able to train customers to know how to use it, but also to know what to expect from it as well.
Are farmers generally becoming more comfortable with the whole the jargon and the technology itself?
In the survey that we did, one of the questions that we asked was around user agreements. This is sort of an indirect way of answering your question, but we asked, essentially, do you read the user agreements? Do you know what they say when it comes to how you share your data? And I guess I could put this in the category of surprise. How infrequent it was that people actually read the user agreements. Now, I say that as a surprise. That shouldn't surprise me, because how often do you read through a user agreement when you download an app or something like that in fine detail? You usually scroll to the bottom and then click the accept button. At least that's how I am. So I guess I'm not surprised in that regard, but I am surprised from the standpoint that on one end, there's concern about the sharing the data and the transparency of that data. And then there's the other around, well, I didn't even read the user agreement. So I don't know what can be done about that. Maybe it's a positive from the standpoint that people are just so comfortable with it now that they feel that they don't have to go through the user agreement. It could also be that they just don't like reading user agreements or can't understand them. So that's a little bit of a interesting scenario. But one piece of evidence that is interesting, sometimes you look at the data that lies within the data. And when you cross-reference the extensive users of data, so we know that from the first question that we ask, and how they feel about how they trust suppliers and whether they read user agreements, there seems to be, for lack of a better term, a little bit more awareness, attention, maybe a little more sophistication for those higher users of data, that they are actually paying attention and clearly feeling more comfortable using that data because they are extensive users of it.
Krista, what do you hope that people will take away from today's conversation?
The biggest thing is, if you are collecting data, I would say, invest, take some time to think of a tool or a program that's going to help you use your data to make decisions on your farm, whatever that might be, whatever type of operation. I mean, there's definitely tools out there, there's support out there. And I just think if you do some research and some digging, there's lots of opportunities for farmers.
Justin, any thoughts?
I agree with Krista. I think doing your research to find a tool that will work well with your farm and achieve your goals. I think that's really important. I think some of the data that we look at may be more or less useful. So, ask yourself, what are you trying to accomplish? But then I would say also tap into the resources that are out there. There's a lot of really good people who understand how to use this data, who can help farmers implement this. And I'm thinking like the local retailer, for instance. These people are there to help with crop production decisions, but they have just as much a vested interest in farmers being good users of data as anybody. And so don't be afraid to ask for help from those people. That's part of the value package that they bring to the table, and I think it should be taken advantage of for sure, in a good way, utilized.
Well, thanks to both of you for joining us today on this special edition of Between the Rows. I've been speaking with Krista Kilback, the Ag Expert Marketing Manager at Farm Credit Canada, and Justin Funk, partner with Real Agri Studies Research based in Guelph. I'm Laura Rance.